Good morning, everyone. It's Dan Basse and Ben Buckner back at you on Tuesday. We are looking at markets that are lower this morning, following that seasonal trend in which we normally have a rally following the USDA crop report in August into the beginning of the Pro Farmer Tour, and then prices tend to work lower. We've seen this price pattern repeat several times in the last few years, and it seems to be playing out again. Now, one of the reasons we work lower into the end of the month is First Notice Day against September futures. There's a lot of talk going around the markets about North Dakota elevators maybe not buying new crop soybeans from farmers as they don't want to get caught without a Chinese program. If you're in North Dakota, you've got a crusher to go to, but if you don't have any soybeans that are headed west to the Pacific Northwest, you've got a problem, and your facility will get filled, and the turnover of grain will not be very great. That also being said, we have problems in the Delta where corn farmers are having problems finding places to put all their corn. So, Ben, it's that kind of market. I guess as we think going forward, we've got a supply-driven market in the corn. We probably have liquidated most of the short positions in funds and soybeans now through yesterday. And we believe with China's absence, we may have a demand-led market a demand bear market to the downside. So kind of lead us into what you think. But overall, I still believe it's the cash markets and the weakening basis levels that'll take us down over time. What do you see?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, even looking at pro farmers data so far, day one, the numbers from our tour, putting that against storage capacity as reported by NASS in specific states. I mean, you're getting to 100% in a lot of places. And so when you talk about what exists as carryover in a state like Iowa or Illinois, you probably have surpassed the ability to store what is soon to be harvested. And as I'll touch on in a bit, the new crop year is here for corn in a lot of places, and that harvest in the South is expanding pretty quickly. But otherwise, this is going to sound and look like every Tuesday morning, really since the beginning of summer. So we have had sort of a modest, seasonally normal erosion in crop condition ratings in corn, 71% good, excellent on Sunday, 72% the previous week, but 67% a year ago. Still the highest since 2016, seventh highest on record. None of that has really changed for the last 30 days, but it still looks like a very healthy corn crop, and we're seeing that from Pro Farmer. And everyone's crop condition based yields will still be very high and probably about what NASS thinks in their first estimate last week. Soybeans similar, but a little bit better compared to average. 68% good to excellent, unchanged from last week, but that compares to about 60% on average for the middle of October. And places like Wisconsin and Iowa still above 80% good to excellent. So where you see in your maps, pretty strong positive soil moisture anomalies, crops there, and as we can vouch for, are very, very healthy. Pod counts, like we found last week, do seem to be one of the emerging stories from Pro Farmers Tour. This is also, the eighth highest on record, highest in about 5 years. So crop conditions at least still point to very high yields in the September report. And those correlations do get a little better as the calendar year flips over. So I think if you don't have a pretty significant drop in crop conditions in the next couple of weeks, NASS yields do look pretty good for now until we get combine data. I just wanted to highlight what's happened the last 48 hours. So I know a lot of people do need rain. Our concern is probably places like Kentucky, the Eastern Corn Belt, just haven't had the water that a state like Iowa or a place like Western Illinois has had. But in the last 48 hours, some places have done very, very well. So a lot of the sort of Northwest Corn Belt Great Lakes region seen, anywhere from 0.4 of an inch to up to 2 to 4 inches of rainfall. So kind of quietly, it's been a pretty showery start to the week here. And so I think a place like, the northern half of Illinois, the Western Corn Belt, this probably carries crops into the end of the growing season. This is enough to coast on, I believe. So our focus will be the nuance and the details of what happens east of the Mississippi River for the next 2, maybe 4 weeks. But wanted to also just kind of highlight just how fast this corn crop is moving, south of about Tennessee. So you can see here that Louisiana 61% finish, was on Sunday. Arkansas is moving a little bit more rapidly, should get to about 50% harvested, maybe in the next 10 days. And so according to NASS data, which I think is about correct, probably about 180 million bushels of corn have been harvested and are finding their way to either bins or to the elevators. So thinking about the need to sustain pretty sizable weekly corn exports, those elevators will be getting pretty full pretty quick. And just to reiterate, now that we've got at least NASS's initial forecast, assuming they are correct, combined corn production Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana will be up 160 million bushels, or about 50% from last year. So sizable crops there, and just thinking about how all this corn moves around once the sort of principal Midwest gets going in the next 30, maybe 40 days. So again, like I mentioned, the new crop season is here in a lot of places, and so we're having to contend with the replenishment or refilling of the cash pipeline. And also, soybeans in Louisiana, 11% harvested. Soybeans, 27% mature there, 10% mature in Mississippi. So that's forthcoming, I think, in the next couple of weeks. Just new crop supplies being harvested, needing to find a home. That, I think, to your point, Dan, it's kind of cash markets, and how do we deal with this as we think we are going to run out of storage capacity? About for the first time since 2016, maybe the second time in the last couple of decades. So just something to think about. And I think too, thinking about the other side of this. So we will ultimately get to a place where we know what supplies are in the U.S. What crop size is. We know what we're having to contend with in terms of getting rid of stuff. But just wanted to kind of challenge everyone thinking about this, in the next 100 days. And so we're always about risk management. What do you do when markets react violently one way or the other? But again, thinking about this and fast forwarding maybe 90 or 100 days, do we have Chinese demand for soybeans? Is there a crop problem somewhere on Earth? And that's been one of our strong theses is what's the next disruption? So we know we're going to have a lot of stuff in the U.S. That is not terribly insightful, but probably you don't find a lot of excitement in the markets until there is a disruption somewhere. We've talked a lot about Enzo. That's still the case. All the major forecasting models, pretty neutral, neither La Nina nor El Nino for the next, 5 to 6 months. And that already is playing out in the Southern Hemisphere. So just something that's jumped out to me in the last couple of days. I know this is very long term, but last week we got updated 3-month climate forecast from the IRI. And that's what you see on the left. I've highlighted South America. The circled areas are major growing seasons. And so you don't really see any problems, according to them, outside of Uruguay, which is a very small producer of soybeans. On the right, you've got the 10-day forecast in Argentina, southern Brazil, and eastern Paraguay, some pretty heavily concentrated row crop areas. And so it's already very wet, 2 to 4 inches of rain. So I don't think once we get into very early crop planting in Argentina, the latter part of September, not going to be a water issue. I know it's a long way to go, but I think unlike recent years, Argentina has been blessed with a lot of rain already since about the middle of July. The same thing's happening in Australia. And we've seen a lot of climate forecasts start to trend really wet in Southeast Asia and Australia. And that was validated by IRI last week. On the left, you've got the 90-day precip probability forecast. Major wheat, canola producing areas are highlighted. Then go check on the 10-day forecast, and it's already kind of validating this long-term outlook. So you've got an abundance of rain pretty much everywhere outside of South Australia. New South Wales, Western Australia probably do very well. We're going to see vegetation health improve there. So again, just kind of measuring what happens over the next 3 months, 6 months. And I don't think we see on the other side of the U.S. harvest a supply disruption, at least as of now. So again, think about what happens between now and the end of the year. We're kind of concerned we have maybe a 4th consecutive crop cycle that the major exporters have trend above trend yield. So that is what's jumped out to me, and I think that's what's kind of important as we all debate how low is low in the short term.
Oh, good outlook, Ben. I really appreciate that. And, roughly in about 10 or 12 days, they'll be planting soybeans across the northern portions of Mato Grosso again. So the cycle continues. I mean, this is not ending. And we'll be watching Brazilian weather very carefully. But I think your point about, the harvest on soybeans and 160 million bushels of extra corn down in the Gulf states is important to really get your arms around. So thank you for all of that. It's a good rundown. And I think as we sit back from Ag Resource, there's still downside potential because of the cash leadership that we talked about. Until next time, we wish you a good trading day on Tuesday. Be well, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow morning and have another insight into the U.S. and global grain markets. Be well.